I recorded a version of this video years ago, and it is definitely time to update what a financial therapist is, how to become one, and what differentiates us from other types of people in the financial field. So financial therapy is relatively new within the world of psychotherapy. To be clear, behavioral finance has existed for a really long time, but the research, the data has almost exclusively been used by folks in sales and in marketing and in advertising. So my understanding of the way that the field of financial therapy existed came from the Journal of Financial Therapy. They published a paper probably 10-ish years ago about how it came to be. It really was a group of finance professionals and psychologists, marriage and family therapists who came together and said, look, each of us in our respective disciplines is experiencing things that could be helpful to have somebody else's guidance on. Meaning the financial planners were feeling like, sometimes I feel like a therapist at work. And the therapists were sometimes feeling like when money gets brought up in a session, I don't have a ton of skills to help them navigate it. So they came together and brainstormed on what are the things that overlap where each of us could help each other push forward in our field while kind of staying in our lane. And so thus the field of financial therapy was born. Right now, at the time of this recording, I think things will probably be changing, but there are a few different ways that you can call yourself a financial therapist. But in my opinion, it's still really tricky from a consumer standpoint to figure out, is a financial therapist a therapist, or are they a person who has a certification in financial therapy, but they aren't a therapist? Sound confusing? It's because it is. Before we get into the nuances of that, let's talk about why behavioral finance matters and why financial psychology matters. We know that most of our money decisions are not driven by Excel sheets and budgets and by the numbers. Even though we think we are making our decisions based on the numbers, most of us are making financial decisions based on how we feel. In fact, behavioral finance experts agree that between 80 and 90% of our financial choices are driven by how we feel. And the way that we feel about money impacts other areas of our life, including our stress levels, our anxiety levels. According to a Capital One survey, 73% of Americans cite money as the number one cause of their stress. According to the Financial Planning Association, 71% of their clients endorse experiencing financial anxiety. According to a 2022 MetLife survey of over 1,400 employees, 38% of them said the state of their finances was stressing them out, and 26% of them said that their feelings about their finances felt like depression. A third of them had lost sleep when they thought about the stress that their money was causing them. And 1 in 6 of them said that money had led to arguments within their home. As a financial therapist, I'm often asked questions where people are trying to boil down the top 3 or the top 5 things that cause a person to experience financial stress. But it is not that simple. It is not that not having enough money causes stress and having enough money means you won't be stressed. We are talking about the nuances of a thing that impacts every single aspect of our lives. Our money, what we earn, what we have, and what we owe impacts all the things. It impacts where we live, it impacts how we work, it impacts where we travel or where we don't, it impacts what we buy or don't buy, it impacts what we think we're allowed to purchase or what we have to save for. It gives us all of these things that impact the way that we think and the way that we feel. There is no one size fits all, just do this and everything will be fine when it comes to unpacking your relationship with money. And on that note, financial trauma, a very specific subset of financial therapy, is really about digging into how trauma shows up in relationship to our money. And trauma can be big T trauma, so think a person who maybe witnessed their house burning down. That is definitely going to cause a lot of financial trauma. Or think about a person who maybe experienced gender-related microaggressions when they were negotiating a raise at work, and how navigating through the world constantly being barred with these microaggressions would impact the way that you think you deserve to have or not have money, right? The overarching thing that leads us to, okay, Lindsay, but who is actually a financial therapist? And this is where things get so confusing. And the reason it's so confusing is because therapy in general is pretty confusing. I am a licensed social worker within the state of Michigan. That means I can provide clinical services such as therapy in my state, but I also can do more general social work style work such as case management, resource providing, advocacy, advocacy, nonprofit work. It's a pretty broad thing. Other people who are allowed to call themselves psychotherapists where I live are people who have a master's degree in counseling, people who have master's degrees in marriage and family therapy, and people who have master's degrees in psychology. Other people who are allowed to call themselves therapists are people who have PhDs in psychology, people who have PsyDs, and people who are MDs as psychiatrists. It's confusing. And what makes it even more confusing is that therapist as a term is protected in some states and not protected in other states. So if somebody is saying things like, I diagnose and treat, you're going to want to make sure that they have a master's degree at minimum in counseling, marriage and family therapy, social work, or psychology. If they don't, then they are not a licensed therapist. If you're unsure of whether they're licensed or not, and they're using terms like counselor and therapist, but you can't really figure out what schooling they've had, ask them, what national association and board of ethics do you have to report to for your licensure? Every single licensed counselor, therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist will know how to answer that and will be able to give you an answer to that. Me, I'm a social worker, so I report to the National Association of Social Workers. Other people who are psychologists would report to the APA, the American Psychological Association, and so on and so forth. If somebody says, oh, I do therapeutic work, or I'm a therapist, but I don't report to any of those boards, that's a red flag. Another red flag is asking them about how they code for their services. Licensed medical providers, such as licensed counselors, marriage and family therapists, social workers, psychologists, etc., they have to be able to have a billing code in order for insurance to reimburse them. If somebody says, oh, I don't do billing codes or things like that, they might not be actually licensed. So that's therapy, and then we layer on financial therapy, and then we get really confusing. So this is my reminder to do your due diligence, ask a lot of questions. When you are hiring somebody to be a financial therapist, they should be able to answer these questions. And if they can't, that's probably a good sign that you can take your business elsewhere. In my opinion, if you're going to use the word therapist, which in most states is a protected term, I think you need to have your master's degree as a therapist and then your additional training in financial therapy, and then you have that Venn diagram of who can practice financial therapy. Now, some people will disagree with me because at the time of this recording, anybody who has a bachelor's degree in a money or mental health related field can go and get a certificate in financial therapy. And then they can say, I'm certified in financial therapy. Confused? Me too. But they might not be therapists. They might have a bachelor's degree in economics. They might be a certified financial planner who has training in financial therapy. But in my opinion, they should not be calling themselves a therapist because it's confusing to the consumer who is looking for therapeutic services. Allow me to use myself as an example. Prior to doing what I do, I've had other jobs, right? Most of us have had other jobs before we end up where we end up. I worked in pediatric psychiatry research, and I took a lot of different trainings within the field of pediatric psychiatry. However, I would never call myself a psychiatrist because I did not attend med school, nor am I a physician practicing in the field of psychiatry. So I would say things like, I'm a social worker who has training in this particular thing, but I would never say I'm a psychiatrist because I took this one training course. Does that make sense? In order to become a financial therapist, there are different pathways. I gave you my definition, but different organizations define them differently. So choose your own adventure. If you're looking into hiring a financial therapist or you're looking to become one, check out these different resources at the time of this recording. This is the information that is available on their websites, knowing that it's obviously subject to change. Psst. Are you loving this content? Did you know you can hire me to come speak to your employees or colleagues? You can. All you have to do is visit mindmoneybalance.com/speaking to learn more. Back to the video. I mentioned the CFT, that's a certificate in financial therapy that is administered by the Financial Therapy Association. In order to get that, you have to have a bachelor's degree in a money or mental health related field, and then you have to pay to take a series of video courses, study for an exam, get 500 hours of financial therapy work in, get a letter of recommendation from your supervisor, and pass an exam that asks asks you questions about personal finance and about the therapeutic side of money. So things like family therapy and how it applies to financial therapy, things like trauma, things like communication, and how it relates to our relationship with money. So that's the certificate in financial therapy that's administered by the FTA. Then you have the University of Maryland School of Social Work. They have a specific track in financial social work, which is so exciting. You can get a master's degree in social work with a specialty in financial social work. You also have the Trauma of Money certification program. It is run in an interdisciplinary way, pulling from different people's lived and academic experiences to help people understand trauma and money and how they intersect. Anybody is allowed to take it, but there are different tracks whether you want to use it for personal use or professional use. Creighton University offers a financial psychology and behavioral finance graduate certificate. So it's a certificate program that can actually lead to you getting a master's degree in behavioral finance. And then we have the Center for Financial Social Work certification program, which is a series of videos doing some self-paced learning and then sitting for an exam. Personally, I am certified through the Financial Therapy Association, and I have my CFT Level 1 certificate. I also have a certification in financial social work, and I just enrolled in the Trauma of Money course. I like to learn. I like to make sure that I'm staying up to date, and that is what feels really good to me. Those are different avenues. If I would put on my predict the future mind, I'm going to imagine that in the next few years, we're going to see the criteria tighten up for who is allowed to call themselves a financial therapist. My hypothesis behind this is because it is newer in the field of psychotherapy, that it's taking people some time to figure out where it fits and where it belongs and how we use a term like therapy outside of the field of psychotherapy. And so I just have a hunch that things are going to tighten up. And my hope is that in the future, it will be easier for both people who are interested in going into this field and for people who are looking to hire a financial therapist to be able to identify who is a financial therapist and who is not. Outside of training to become a financial therapist, I do agree that it's super, super important for people on both sides of the financial therapy spectrum to have cross-discipline training or interdisciplinary training in the other field, meaning it's important for psychotherapists to learn how to become more financially competent, and similarly for personal finance professionals to have some training in therapy. It doesn't mean that either one has to go and get certified in the other person's discipline, but I don't think it's going to hurt any of us to have more expansive knowledge of the way that money impacts the way we feel and how the way we feel impacts what we do with our money. I just think it makes common sense. And so I am here for cross-discipline or interdisciplinary training. And to me, if you're already a social worker, counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, or psychologist, and you're looking for more ways to become financially competent, you have so many different options. I think it can be helpful to consider things like continuing education credits. I think most of us for professional licenses, we have to maintain our licensure by doing a lot of continuing education. So look for continuing education that talks about money or talks about financial psychology. And if you're in more of the financial advising field, I think it's important to learn a little bit more about the way that humans are. I love it when CFPs and other finance professionals demonstrate an interest in learning about human psychology and the way that sociology and systems impact why we do what we do. A finance professional can certainly seek out more training. Again, you have to do continuing ed. So when you attend different conferences or online trainings, look for things that talk about emotions. Look for trainings on money shame, financial anxiety, money trauma, and learning how to understand that so you can be a better, well-rounded financial planner. In 2022, the Financial Planning Association surveyed the clients of financial planners. And what they found was that financial planners who were willing to talk about a client's financial anxiety positively and significantly related to some amazing outcomes, including increased satisfaction with the planner-client relationship, cooperation with the planner's recommendations, referrals, referring their friends and family and loved ones to their financial planner, and openness to actually discussing financial and personal information. In other words, talking about emotions helps to deepen the connection between financial planners and their clients and helps to actually make the change. So often, I think financial financial planners and other folks in the space are so well-meaning, but they're so into the numbers that they can forget that there is a human with a lot of emotions on the other side of their desk or of their screen, and they can get so excited about the beautiful 20-page document that talks about like projections and income and expenses and all the things, instead of thinking about what does my client actually need. I'm definitely here for finance professionals who get additional training on the emotional side of money. Why aren't there more financial therapists? If you are watching this and you're like, whoa, where are they? If I didn't answer it before, I'm gonna be super clear. It's because it's a newer niche within the world of psychotherapy, and it's emerging as becoming more and more popular among finance planning professionals. As I mentioned, my prediction is that we're gonna tighten up who can call themselves financial therapists, but my hope is that there will be more and more financial therapists in the years to come, because money impacts every single aspect of our lives. And even though I'm such a proponent of doing things like this, watching a YouTube video or listening to a podcast, reading a book, online connection with communities of like-minded people, all of those things are so powerful in terms of healing your relationship with money. And sometimes we just need personalized one-on-one help with a trained professional, and my hope is that we see more and more financial therapists in the years to come. Let me know what surprised you about this, if I confused you, or if I helped you figure out whether or not you can become a financial therapist or who a financial therapist is, and I'll see you as always in the next video.